Hello, thank you for joining us for the Resiliency in the Riverway session with Dan Peterson from the National Park Service. This session will be about 50 minutes. I'm October Yates. I work for the Wild Rivers Conservancy. I'm an outdoor program support staff working in outdoor education. I'll be in the background moderating the chat and helping with any technical difficulties along the way. Just some housekeeping on this session. On the right of the screen, you'll see the chat box. And if you'd like to share a question with the group, please just type it in there and we will get to them at the end of the session. And the session is being recorded and will end up on YouTube if you'd like to go back and view it at a later date. Or if you were in another session, you can do that as well. And so now I'd like to introduce Dan, and he will kick us off.
Great. Well, thank you very much, October, and welcome, and hello, everyone. Welcome to Resiliency in the Riverway. So my name is Dan Peterson. I'm a park ranger, national park ranger, with the National Park Service, St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. And so I'm glad to be here with all of you today. My counterpart, Lisa Yeager, she's unable to join us today, so it's just me. I may have some other friends with joining me here today. But yeah, I definitely, excited to be here with all of you and to talk about this amazing place we know as St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. But also with a technical question that I think I have for everyone that I'll share and get into in just a moment. But St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, I'm not sure how many of you have been there or been here, but when you think about the words national park, maybe you have some spaces that come to mind. Or even just the word park itself. Think about what comes to mind when you hear the word park. Is it green, playgrounds, fountains, animals? Probably lots of different things that come to mind when you think about park. Well, for the National Park Service, there's an array of parks that we have in our nation. That have, just exactly what we described with grass and trees and, well, there's mountains and lakes and there's animals too. But in our nation, we have a set of parks known as national parks or parks of the nation. And there's a lot of them in our nation. In fact, gosh, there's like 64 national parks that we have in our nation. Maybe you've heard of a few of them. Like Yellowstone National Park in Arizona, or maybe Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona, or even down in Florida, there's Everglades National Park. Well, within our national park system, we have a number of other parks, but they don't have the words national park in its name. They do have the word national in its name. So maybe you've heard in Wisconsin, the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, or maybe Ice Age National Scenic Trail. Well, there's lots of other national park units, as we call, in our nation. Well, the one I'm from that I like very much so is the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. So our National Scenic Riverway consists of two rivers. There's the St. Croix River that starts up, the headwaters starts up in Solon Springs, Wisconsin, and then empties down into the Mississippi in Prescott, Wisconsin, or just near Hastings, Minnesota. There's another river in the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway Park known as the Namakagon River. And the Namakagon, it started up near Cable, Wisconsin, and it empties into the St. Croix just north of Danbury, Wisconsin. And the Namakagon is a large tributary to the St. Croix. The tributary means it's a body of water, a creek or a stream that flows into another river. So the Namakagon is the largest tributary to the St. Croix. There's lots of other tributaries and streams to the St. Croix, but the Namakagon is the biggest one. If we look at this map here, we have a map of Wisconsin and Minnesota, but we're looking at the 99 miles of the Namakagon River and also about 130 miles of the St. Croix. Now, my question is, and for all of you, to go ahead and throw an answer into the chat. Just kind of curious, where are you from, and where are you on this map? We can see there's Danbury and Hayward and Minong, Cable, or if we go down the St. Croix, there's Taylor's Falls, St. Croix Falls, Osceola, Hudson, or even Prescott. So it's a big area. But it's different than any other national park because it's really just a ribbon of water. But anyway, getting to this area, it does cover a lot of different towns. In fact, the watershed of the St. Croix is quite large. Now you may wonder, what does that word mean, watershed? Well, it's definitely not a building. What it means is basically it's as water. When it hits the land, it sheds off the land. So as rain hits the hill, it may percolate down in the ground, but then it also may shed off that hill and flow into another body of water. So in this case, there are lots of rivers and streams and creeks that all flow into the St. Croix River, making up the St. Croix River watershed. And so there's hundreds of tributaries that feed into the St. Croix. The watershed is quite large, from way out near Cable, Wisconsin, and way beyond Mille Lacs Lake in Minnesota and all the way down to Prescott. It's a big area, about the size of the state of New Jersey, which is roughly around 8,000 square miles. But yeah, it's thinking about St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. Yeah, it is a river of life, lots of different kinds of animals. Raccoon and beaver and muskrats, wolves, river otters, and turtles like the ones pictured here. We have painted turtles that are basking on the log. There's a few map turtles there too. Map turtles have a ridge on the top of their carapace or shell. Lots of fish. 93 species of fish, all kinds of shapes and sizes, of panfish to lake sturgeon and muskie and pike and others. And there's freshwater mussels, these clam-like animals that have gills. We have 41 species of freshwater mussels that live in the rivers of the Namakagon and St. Croix, and also eagles and other birds. Well, and people. I have to include people because people have been on the landscape for thousands of years. The indigenous peoples that still live here today, as well as all of us that go out and recreate on the river. But the best way to see this park is by boat, getting out on a canoe or by a kayak and experiencing it. So that's really the best way to see this park. However, there's a bit of concern that's been raising. Maybe a lot of you have heard about climate change. And climate change is on the minds of many, of the effect that climate change may have on the Riverway experience. Well, maybe backing up a little bit, climate change, what is that? Well, climate is basically defined as temperatures and wind and its conditions of the earth. And so maybe defining a little bit about what climate change really kind of means is that we look at this picture here. Burning fossil fuels, that's organic material like coal and gas and natural gas. Whenever you have that burning, you have an exhaust, and that exhaust is CO2, carbon dioxide. And so that carbon goes into the atmosphere and kind of creates a cover in our atmosphere. Maybe some of you heard of greenhouse gas. And so the greenhouse effect. And so that CO2 gas blocks and holds in temperature. And so we end up having temperature rises. If we expand that thought a little bit more, so we have burning of fossil fuels, creating CO2, we having the rise of temperature. What happens when temperatures rise? Well, you think about the polar ice caps and the glaciers. They start to melt, and then you have rising of seas. And then we also have wild weather. And just within the decade, we have seen some amazing weather shifts, more hurricanes and different violent storms. Some people may think about, well, how about the flooding that's going on right now on the St. Croix? The pictures that we're seeing from still water and from the area of boat ramps being flooded, is climate change a cause of that? Well, I don't know if it is or not. You think about, gosh, we've had a pretty amazing winter, long winter with lots of snow, and now that snow is melting, and some of those up in Duluth are still experiencing snow. I know they had snow not too long ago. So I don't know, is that part of climate change? I don't know. Something to think about. Well, I need all of your help. I'm going to show a video, and this talks all about the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. And so I'm going to hire all of you as environmental inspectors for the National Park Service. And so your task is to inspect the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway and identify where you see climate change and where and how could it impact the visitor experience. So this is an 18-minute video, which I'll show you, and just think about that. But before, actually, I've got a couple other questions to give to you. When you're watching this film, think about this question. Use your senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What could you touch? And then what could you smell? And if you could, put your answers into the chat. I'd like to see where you're at. So that's question number one, using your senses. What do you see, hear, touch, or smell? Question number two is, how could climate change affect plants and animals in the Riverway? And then number three is, how would climate change affect outdoor recreation in the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway? Okay, so having those questions in mind, if you come up with some of those answers, go ahead and put them in the chat box. And let's enjoy this picture here. Let's see.
I live here because of the river. I think this river has a soul. I feel a connection with the soul of this river, and it's my home.
In the quiet of a Northwoods morning, two rivers flow across the land. And through the seasons. Eventually they join as one. For 252 miles, the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway preserves and protects a narrow corridor along the St. Croix and Namakagon rivers. They run clear and clean beneath sentinels of pine and hardwood, between dark cliffs of volcanic rock, and straight into the hearts of those who walk their banks and paddle their waters.
Well, to me, the Namakagon has been a part of my life since I was a boy. I've been down this river so many times you can't even count. But every time I go down, it's like the first time.
This is my river. Not actually, but I've been out here all my life. I've been guiding for 26 years now. I think I get to know the river pretty well. And there's times when I realize I don't know much about it at all.
Namakagon Lake in northern Wisconsin. The source of the Namakagon River. Here, the river begins as a narrow trout stream, snaking its way on a 98-mile journey to the St. Croix River at Danbury.
If you go up there and canoe today, it will look exactly the way it did 1,000 years ago. They're just the utter silence of nature and the beauty of that river.
The St. Croix also has its humble origin in northern Wisconsin. For 129 miles, it forms the border between Wisconsin and Minnesota before joining the Mississippi near Prescott. Today, the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway is a living, breathing treasure. Along its banks, one can see an amazing diversity of plant and animal life. Fascinating geology and evidence that this was not always a wild place. But the real magic of the Riverway is the water itself. Free-flowing, clean, and simply enchanting.
We have people that come up every single year for 20 years, for 30 years. They come every year
even for lunch break
to go on the river because they love it so much. That's how special it is.
And yet, it was nearly lost. During the 1960s, a flood prompted the Army Corps of Engineers to propose building a dam just north of St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin. The dam would create a reservoir 30 miles long, wiping out large sections of river habitat. The proposed dam wasn't the only threat to the St. Croix.
It was threatened by a power plant, and I think that was about 10 years in the making. And people realized that we need to protect this river, so no more power plants will be built.
And the idea that we would let these areas be despoiled, it offends my sense of what America's about.
15,000 years ago, this land was covered by ice sheets thousands of feet thick. The Ice Age created glaciers that advanced deep into what is now Wisconsin and Minnesota. As the glaciers began retreating, the St. Croix and Namakagon were born. Torrents of meltwater rushed through the valley, moving south towards ancient volcanic basalt in the area now known as the Dells.
There was so much water and it was moving so quickly that it simply smashed into this cracked basalt. And rather than that water slowly wearing away this very hard rock, it simply worked its way in between those cracks and crevices and literally blasted through, forming this river gorge.
The waters made possible an extraordinary web of life. The reddish young leaves of maples, birches, and ashes in time became forests of beautiful hardwoods. Towering white and red pines joined them along the riverbanks. An explosion of wildflowers carpeted the forest floors. The trees, plants, and shrubs provided a habitat for an incredible variety of wildlife. just below the river's shimmering surface, another fascinating world. Aquatic plants, 94 species of fish, and a rich population of freshwater mussels. This land of plentiful natural resources also attracted a newcomer, one whose presence would forever change life on the rivers. Rock art and burial mounds can be found along the river, evidence that humans have inhabited this valley for thousands of years. By the 1700s, the Ojibwe and Dakota peoples lived in villages along and around the St. Croix and Namakakan. They moved to the rhythms of the seasons and subsisted on the abundant wildlife drawn here by the rivers.
It's a lot of work, but it's meaningful work.
Today, they remain connected to the clean waters, continuing the spiritual traditions of their ancestors.
Manuman, Indian word for wild rice.
Wild rice is an aquatic grass native to the North American wetlands.
This plant is sacred to us, which is why we treat it with respect.
The Ojibwe people harvest it using hand-carved sticks of cedar.
It's a way of life that our ancestors have told us for many years, to always respect the resources. We can still continue our culture living in the modern world. We respect and understand where we came from.
For the Ojibwe, wild rice was food that nourished both body and spirit. But another resource of the rivers caught the eye of a new visitor. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, French, Canadian, and British fur traders established posts along the rivers of the upper Midwest. In exchange for beaver pelts, they introduced native peoples to metal tools and firearms. The Europeans attached the name St. Croix to the river that held so much wealth, and adopted an Ojibwe word meaning place where the sturgeon spawn to designate the Namakakan. By the 1820s, most of the beaver in the area had been trapped out, but by then, another of the valley's treasures had been discovered.
In the 1800s, people are aware of the white pine trees that are growing here in the valley and that they're very desirable. And so in 1837, a treaty was signed. The Indians gave up the right to this land, and that allowed for loggers to come in here to start cutting down the trees. And they did immediately.
They clear-cut the forests in the northern part and floated them down the St. Croix River. During that time, up along both shores of the St. Croix River, popped up over a dozen sawmills. The first spring thaw, the logs would float down and were jammed so tightly that you could almost walk across the river.
They had thought, as most people think, that the trees would last. By 1910, they were almost out. By 1914, logging was over here, and they were moving either further north or west.
With the end of logging, the character of the St. Croix changed once more, from a river of commerce to one of recreation. Americans were soon driving from the bustling cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul.
They could fish, they could relax, they could get away from the city for the summer months. At the same time, the country as a whole was realizing that many, if not most of the rivers were polluted.
And we didn't want the same thing to happen here and happen to the rivers around the country where there was still time to save them. And we had a chance to protect that here and in many other places in the country, but especially to me, here.
In the 1960s, Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson teamed with a young senator from Minnesota named Walter Mondale in an effort to protect the rivers they so cherished. In 1968, Nelson and Mondale were able to have the St. Croix and Namakagon designated as one of the original 8 rivers of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. Federally preserved and protected by the National Park Service, the corridor became known as the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway.
This river was selected as one of the top 8 in the original Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and that really speaks volumes to me in terms of people's values of this river.
There was people around here that were mad because they thought they were taking their river away from them. That's not what happened. They gave our river back to us, actually.
Today, the benefits of the Wild and Scenic River Act are reaped by all who visit. A place to cool off on a hot summer day. A place to be inspired by the Riverway's beauty.
We can immerse ourselves in it, physically as well as in the colors and the richness of it. It's a wonderful visual buffet.
But along this river and on it can be found the greatest gift of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. Solitude.
And it gives me a perspective about life. Come down here at night and just listen. You know, listen. And you can learn a lot from listening.
This is still a wild river. So many species of fish, the different species of insect life, invertebrate life. With all signs of a real clean and healthy river.
The greatest testament of the health of the Riverway continues to be found on its bottom, the mussel population.
What makes our river so dramatic and of national significance is we have the same 40 species that we believe we've had for the past 300 or 400 years. They're a good barometer for the overall health of the river.
And yet being preserved and protected doesn't mean that the St. Croix is not threatened. The zebra mussel, an invasive species introduced to the Great Lakes in the 1980s, is threatening to wipe out the St. Croix's native mussel population. Another threat comes from the Twin Cities, where development is pressuring the Riverway's fragile ecosystem. And the clean waters of the St. Croix and Namakagon are at the mercy of the surrounding watershed that feeds it.
For the St. Croix is almost 8,000 square miles. And so there are things happening in the hinterlands that might affect the St. Croix. We just can't look at this thin river protection. So it's this whole watershed approach that has to be taken to protect the St. Croix.
That's why those who love this river are hoping to inspire and educate the next generation. Every summer, kids from the city come to Camp Sunrise for a week of teamwork, environmental education, and recreation. During that stay, they learn an important message, that the future of the St. Croix Riverway is in their hands. Every fall, the Riverway becomes a classroom.
You did?
These fourth graders are from Solon Springs, a Wisconsin town near the source of the St. Croix.
Who found that? Do you know what it is? It's actually going to turn into a dragonfly. It's a dragonfly nest. A big one. They live on the upper St. Croix, so they're kind of at the beginning of everything. So it's so important for them because they're the start. If they do bad things to the river, that's going to trickle all the way down to the Mississippi, to the ocean.
It's a lesson for all. The Riverway is as fragile as it is precious.
The waters of St. Croix River is sacred. It's important that our young kids understand this.
I think what visitors should be taking with them, or what that I hope they would take with them, is a sense of how important this place is to be protected.
This is for everybody. But I don't mind if other people use it as long as they respect it. Although I still do consider it my river.
Okay. Let's see here. Before I get into observations, I want to get back to my screen here and unscreen it. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Everyone can see, let's see. I guess I'm still in a. Oh, here I am. Everyone can see me now. I'm not sharing my screen. Is that right? Just kind of looking in the chats to see if we have anybody. Well, okay, we've got some. We've got Amory here, New Richmond, Amory, Star Prairie. Oh, lovely! Great to see all of you here. Thinking about those questions, then, did anyone come up with any thoughts as far as that first question about senses? What could you see? What could you hear? What could you touch? Probably a lot of those things, would come into mind. Let's see here. If I go back into my screen here. So looking at that first question, observations, what did you see? What did you hear or touch or smell? Possibly lots of things in that visual, at least in the video, lots of visual that we saw, the hearing, touching, the rocks. If any of you have been on the river and have dipped your hand into the water and felt the rocks and the sand, and maybe even smelling. Lots of smelling. And think about climate change as things continue to get warmer and our climate starts to warm. Could something like that, could our senses be, could they be different? Let's see. Go back into our group here. So let's see, we got Melissa from Hillside. We observed lots of trees, water, and wildlife. Fish, mussel shells. Yeah, great. Yeah. And then Melissa was asking how wild rice is collected. Yeah, great to see that. That's something, something we don't get to see often, is how does wild rice get collected? Yeah, very good. Okay. I'll go back to my screen here. So yeah, there's lots of visuals out there. We were seeing the anglers out fishing. This young boy here, he caught a beautiful looking bass last summer. He had to come over and show us. That was wonderful at our visitor center in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin. And I have the opportunity to be out with kids a lot, out fishing and that kind of thing. And I just think about, gosh, climate change could have an effect on our enjoyment of recreating, of fishing, possibly. But as far as, there's lots of tactile right there, right? And the sounds of the water hitting the rocks. and just the buzzings of insects, maybe dragonflies. Just a beautiful sunny day. Oh, aren't we all just craving that right now? I know I am. And then just the visual thing of rangers bringing nature to all of us, to our eyes, and again, using our senses. That's very good. Let me get back to, let's see here. Stop sharing here. Okay, we saw birds, plants, rocks, cliffs, wildlife, and we heard running water. Oh, very much so. Thank you, Bethany from New Richmond. Very good. Yeah. So let's see. Let's go back to our questions. Thank you for those that shared. Okay, so number 2. How could climate change affect plants and animals in the Riverway? That's a tough question. But how could they? How could plants and animals in the Riverway? How could climate change affect that? So let's see here. Any thoughts there? Well, I don't know. What do you think, Rachel? Oh, Rachel. Rachel is a porcupine. She had to come over and visit me with me. Oh, I don't know. I'm not too sure. Yeah. Okay, fine. All right. So let's see. Let's go back to our question here. Okay, so how could climate change affect plants and animals in the Riverway? Well, we look at how plants grow, and these are just some examples, things that maybe you've might have come up with. How animals behave, organisms thrive, how habitats experience different temperatures. So all possibilities. Thinking about the snowshoe hare, a rabbit that we have in our environment. The snowshoe hare is white during the winter months. Its hair blends in, perfect camouflage for it to blend into the snowy environment. But then come summer, it turns brown. Well, with early snow melts, just think about this white snowshoe hare trying to survive in a brown environment, and it's standing out with its brown fur. Easy pickings for a great horned owl or for a red-tailed hawk, some other predator that would find it food. So finding that climate change, we have maybe shorter winters or these early snow melts. Other possibilities, wildfires. Changing in rainfall can affect the frequency or the rate or how many or even the severity of wildfires within ecosystems. So wildfires could increase. And then flooding. Flooding is very much a thing in our news right now. It is flooding. All this flooding that's going on, is that all part of climate change? It could be part of it, actually. I mean, thinking about, heavier and larger, more violent rainstorms and hurricanes, and they're becoming more frequent in the last decade due to climate change. At least that's what we're thinking of. Yeah. And so then the last question is, how would climate change affect outdoor recreation in the Riverway? Well, let's see. It could worsening air quality, heat-related illnesses, allergies. I don't know, it could be a variety of things. I mean, thinking about canoeing and kayaking and fishing and maybe having more warmer environments might be a better environment for mosquitoes. I don't know. We'll have to see. Let me go back to the screen here. See if we have any. Okay, good. I'm glad I went back to the chats. I'm gonna scroll up here a little bit to see what kind of birds live by the river. What sounds would they make? From Sonia, from Amory, wonderful. And then Melissa, icebergs melting, creating ecosystems in the dells. Oh, yes, yeah. In October, increased precipitation can increase flooding, changing the landscape. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, October. In Brittany, the flooding, deforestation of white pine, building dams. Yeah, and then October, yeah, being an angler yourself, tributary trout will struggle when warm temps rise. And we have a really nice brook trout fishery in the upper reaches of the Namakagon River. And thinking about, gosh, if the water warms, it's not good habitat for brookies that like cold water. So that's, yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. Good. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for all your added chats. Thank you. So let's see here. Okay. So let's see. Yeah. So definitely, like you mentioned, angling and getting out, fishing might be a little bit different if our environment warms up. Maybe not as long winters and more summers and affecting the livelihood or the lives of our native fish. Yeah. So here's a question, going back to now a question is, as an environmental inspector, what could be done to halt or slow the advance of climate change? As an environmental inspector, what could be done to halt or slow the advance of climate change? Well, and that's not necessarily, I'm looking for any answers in the chat. You can throw it in there if you like, but it's kind of an open-ended question for you to think about. And right away, I suppose we've kind of defined a little bit, maybe, and maybe you've heard about, ways to help to reduce or slow down the advance of climate change. One is stop using fossil fuels like coal and oil and gas. Using renewable energies like solar and wind, planting trees and protect trees, which help to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So, I mean, I don't know, there's lots of different things you could do, but as an environmental inspector, that's, there's many other things, growing more trees for sure, recycling, stop pollution, different things there. But what else could I do? Oh gosh, well, it's maybe best thing is to start learning about your area that you live in within the watershed. The St. Croix River watershed, like I said, is a huge area. And just thinking about the rivers that we have in here, maybe learn a little bit more about that environment that you live in. And of course, a little plug for St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. Learn about the Riverway and maybe work for us or volunteer. I have to throw that my little 2 cents in as far as a little promoting and promotion of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. And like I mentioned, we've got a visitor center in St. Croix Falls that's open today. We're open 7 days a week through the mid-October, and also another visitor center on the Namakagon River known as the Namakagon River Visitor Center in Trigo, Wisconsin. A place that you can come inside. We're open daily, 10 to 5, place that you can get in and learn a little bit about the park and how to get out and explore the St. Croix and the Namakagon rivers. We have, we educate kids about the youth about, and people as well, about the river and the life that exists. We have our friends group, the Wild Rivers Conservancy, that we work hand in hand on lots of different projects. And one of which is Rivers Are Alive, a program that gets youth and everyone into the waters to discover the life that exists in those rivers, of the aquatic macroinvertebrates to the mussels, to the birds, and just life in general. And thinking about that, what could climate change do to affect the recreational activities of this riverway? One other thing that you can become, and this is for all ages, is to become a junior ranger to the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. Or work for us. By golly, yes, we're always looking for people to work for us, but also to volunteer. And that's a big thing. And volunteering to be a river steward, to help clean our rivers, to pick up trash. But overall, thinking about the river itself and climate change, it's a huge hurdle. And the title that we have, Resiliency in the Riverway, what does resilience mean? That's a big word, right? Well, it means to rebound, maybe the ability to manage challenges, the ability to overcome challenges, and thinking about climate change, maybe adapting to change or transforming through innovations or ideas, and then implementing those ideas into action. Well, it's how do we go about that? And how can we rebound or come back, from climate change? Like I mentioned earlier, like we discussed earlier, is that, well, using renewable energy sources, driving less, eating local, protect and plant trees. But we also are looking for other ideas. And all our young viewers out there, we're really relying on the younger people too to have other ideas. But it just not just you, it's everyone. It's myself. It's everyone that works for this park. It's everyone on this planet. It's our responsibility to hope to rebound from climate change. And we can get there, but it's going to take the work of all of us. And maybe to be like an environmental inspector, to at least have resiliency in the riverway, but resilience in our planet. Well, there you go. I want to end it all, especially just to open up some comments. Little slide here where we're located as far as within the internet realm. nps.gov/SACN is the web address to the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. So let me get out of this. Let's see, I'm trying to find my, there it is. So I can get back to the screen and look at chats. Okay, here we go. Let's see, looking here a little bit more. Okay, flooding, we got that. Tributary, and we got that October. And then from Melissa, if the river is too high or low, you couldn't use it. Might not be able to fish anymore. How true is that? Yeah, very much so.
Hey, how's it going, Dan? I'm hopping in here.
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you for amazing. We are now is the portion to start Q&A with Dan. If you have any questions about the National Scenic Riverway, please put them in the chat and we will answer them. Give them a few moments just to fill it out. But yeah, thanks, Dan. I really love that video. It gave the whole history.
Yeah, you're welcome. Right.
Who's that?
Well, this is Charlie. Charlie just swimming in through here during my presentation. He's a
here we go. Question came in from Melissa. Does the river flow at different speeds during different seasons?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, so as of right now, the river, we're experiencing all the meltwaters from up north, and the rivers are running fast and cold right now. So it's kind of an exception because of the the fast currency of the river. But on general, though, come the month of June, July, the rivers tend to be running anywhere from about 2 to 4 miles an hour. It's a pretty slow moving river. But yeah, as of today, no, that's not true at all. The rivers are moving quite fast. So thank you. Thanks for your question.
We got another one from Hillside asking, what's the highest the river has ever got?
Oh, wow. What's the highest the river has ever gotten? Well, if we go back into the geologic era of how tall, yes, October is nodding. If we go back, I don't know how many years, if it's 10 or 11,000 years ago. And to get an example of that, if you go to the Wisconsin or Minnesota Interstate State Park and you go trampling around in the pothole, the dells of the St. Croix, the basalt granite gorge in there, that's just an example of how high that water got. Actually, if you get up into St. Croix, overlooking the valley of St. Croix Valley, the ancient riverbanks are these little bluff areas that you see. So I don't know how tall that is, but it's huge. You have to kind of look at it, because at one point, the St. Croix Valley, part of the Boyceboro Brule out of Lake Superior, it drained glacial Lake Superior. And so we had a flow of water that came from Lake Superior using the channel of the St. Croix. So it was huge. It was tall. It's big. So great question. Very good. Thank you.
Just a couple more before lunch break. Hillside also wants to know how many different species of mussels are in the river.
Sure. How many different species? There's 41 species of freshwater mussel that are in the river. And so, yeah, that's a very impressive number to have. Just a great indicator of good water quality. Yeah, it's been like that. And unfortunately, we do have zebra mussel, which is another species of mussel that's out there. That's an invasive species. And that is a mussel that threatens our native population of mussel. Yeah. And then I also see how many species live around the river, if that's referring to mussels. Maybe that's, I don't know if that is, that's referring to mussels. 41 species of freshwater mussel in the river.
And how many endangered species?
Oh, and how many endangered species in the river? Oh, gosh. Well, gosh, I think there's, well, at least 4 or 5 of the mussels are endangered. Oh, boy. How many endangered species in the river? I don't know. I'm going to have to, I don't know. I'm having a mental block. I can't think of anything right now. I'm thinking there, I don't know about endangered. I know where we've got threatened mussel species in the river, but I don't know if there's endangered species. Melissa, I can write down your name and get back to you. How about that? Melissa Hillside. Yeah, great question. October, do you know?
I couldn't tell you. That my first thought was maybe some migratory birds that come through our riverway could be endangered, such as maybe the osprey, but I wasn't 100% positive.
No, the osprey are pretty good. They're in good population. And the only thing of an endangered species that might be in the watershed is the Kirtland's warbler. But nothing really pops into mind though, but thank you.
Well, I think that's it for our session. We're going to break for lunch, and but Dan, thank you so much for sharing everything today. We love hearing from the National Park Service, and I hope to see many of these kids from Hillside and the other schools that joined us today at some of our parks programs. Please reach out at those sources that Dan mentioned earlier if you'd like to volunteer or become a junior ranger. It would really be fun for us to have you, and a great way to enjoy the river and find your love for it, just like we have. So thanks again for joining our stream, and we will continue sessions after lunch.